Welcome back to Good Girls Gotta Heal, the podcast where we learn to release the weight of childhood trauma and step into our most authentic selves. It's time to ditch that good girl mask and embrace a life of ease, compassion, and genuine connection. Join me, Megan Walsh, holistic trauma therapist, and let's embark on a journey of healing and self-discovery together. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Good Girls Gotta Heal. I am Megan, your host, and I am so excited to be here with our guest today. Today, we are so lucky to have Callum Fedele here with us, and I'm going to share a little bit about Callum. So Callum is a licensed creative arts therapist and drama therapist from Syracuse, New York. He runs his own private practice and provides drama therapy workshops across the tri-state area for clinical staff, youth programming, and arts and education. Previously, he held roles such as a program manager, operations manager, commercial assistant, teacher, and teaching artist. Callum is an actor himself and is currently learning guitar. I love that. And is obsessed with the K-pop girl group sensation Blackpink. I have not heard them. Need to add them to my playlist ASAP, clearly.
Yes, thank you.
I love it. Callum, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'm so thrilled to be doing this podcast, my first ever official podcast.
Oh, we're so excited.
To really get to jump into so many different topics with you.
Yes, absolutely. And so grateful to have you here. And what Callum and I share is that we are both licensed creative arts therapists. So that is a therapy license in the state of New York, where I am trained in music psychotherapy. You are trained in trauma psychotherapy. So very cool ways to embody this deep healing work that we do. And so Callum, I would love for the listeners to get to know you even better. So tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you to today in being a drama psychotherapist in private practice.
Thanks, Megan. It's so funny when that question comes up, I immediately am flooded with images and experiences. And there have been so many different turns and paths that I've had to take to get to this moment, like you. And when I think back about my own journey, it really began as the role of the other, this part of myself who really did not feel connected to the world, who didn't see myself often in media or in my family or in my school and community. And part of that is because of my identity locations, which we'll get into, and my experiences because of those locations. And yet the place that really allowed me to find my authentic self was theater, was drama, was acting, was becoming and embodying a different person, a different role. And so it was through the arts that I was able to not only find my authentic self, but really begin to form my identity and ultimately become really seen in that part of myself by people that also reflected that back to me. And so the arts kind of led me on a journey to acting school, to working with youth and youth programming, arts and education, becoming a substitute teacher. And ultimately, I thought about how can I support folks? How can I be that change that I want to see in the world? And also hold on to this very special and fragile and beautiful part of myself that is the artist, that is the creative one. And so that is really cumulatively what kind of led me to finding drama therapy.
Oh, I love it so much. And there's so much in there that I want to dive into. And a few things I want to pull out first, especially for our listener who's probably like, wait, what is drama therapy? And, we've had Rebecca Versace on before. Do you know Rebecca? Yeah.
Vaguely, but yes.
Vaguely, yes. And so she was on, we worked together in New York at NYU a while back. And so we talked a bit about drama therapy and the role in grief work. But tell us a little bit about what it means, the roles that you hold, because I think it's adjacent, I know, to parts work, which we've also had an interview recently about IFS and parts work. But tell us a bit about the roles that we all hold. And then I love identity locations. Tell us a bit about those, because I'm sure everyone will be so interested to think about what are my roles and identity locations.
Yes. I think just to start there, my question kind of coming in today was, what affirms your gender? What affirms
Mm-hmm.
your identity? What
Mm-hmm.
affirms your sexual orientation? What
Yes.
affirms all these different locations?
Mm.
And for me, some of those identity locators are genderqueer. I can present. I was born and I present as a cisgender male. However, at my core, at my soul, I'm
Mm-hmm.
very genderqueer, and I
Yeah.
think that that can be a really confusing space for people
Sure.
who maybe don't know much about it,
Mm-hmm.
and or maybe have a lot of visceral responses when they think of the word
Mm-hmm.
queer, which
Mm-hmm.
we can get into more in a bit.
Yes. Yes.
And so even for me, I was thinking about that role, the queer
Yeah.
one, and coming in today, even
Yes.
the elephant in the room, good girl's got to heal, right? The role of the good
Mm-hmm.
girl.
Yeah.
I have that role too. I have the
Yes,
role
you
of the good
do.
girl. I have the role of the good boy.
Yes.
I have the role of the good
Mm-hmm.
person. And they
Yeah.
all really take on different forms and characteristics.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that is in relation to the way that I was raised and
Yeah.
what was affirmed for me growing up. And then kind
Sure.
of the opposite to that. Where did that gender dysphoria begin for me?
Mm-hmm.
And how did I slowly come into who I am today?
Yeah.
When I look at drama therapy, I studied at NYU
Mm-hmm.
and under Robert Landy's role method,
Mm-hmm.
which just states that
Yes.
every person is made up of a series of roles.
Yeah.
And you spoke to the IFS there, the internal
Mm-hmm.
family systems. And just like IFS, role method is a new language.
Mm-hmm.
It gives people new verbiage to utilize when they're describing and exploring their different
Mm-hmm.
parts, their different personality characteristics, and
Yeah.
the way in which they move through the world. So
Mm-hmm.
that language for me was like, wow, it was like music to my ears. Like, oh my
Yes.
goodness, this resonates so deeply with me as
Yeah.
a queer person. I do have all these different parts, and I've had a hard time trying to understand them. And this
Mm-hmm.
method, role method, really kind of gave me
Mm-hmm.
a language to really
Oh,
start to be able to understand that.
I love that. I love that. And how would you go about if someone's wondering, how do I even know what my roles are? Like what would be your recommendation for someone who
Mm.
is really starting to step into the exploration of what their own roles and identity locations are inside of themselves?
I think stepping into a space where you can look at yourself in the mirror and
Hmm.
asking yourself, who am I?
Yeah.
And that question can be really vulnerable and it can
Hmm.
bring up
Yeah.
so much. It can
Hmm.
bring up so much curiosity. It can bring up so much
Hmm.
confusion. And then just
Yeah.
taking a little notepad and pen and just writing down what are the words that come up for you. I
Yeah.
am a daughter.
Uh-huh.
I am a good girl.
Hmm.
I'm a radical.
Yeah.
I am the rule follower. I'm also the middle child. I am also the inner critic.
Yes.
I am, right? And we start
Hmm.
to really break down and look at these different
Hmm.
characteristics. And
Yeah.
then when you meet with a therapist, and
Hmm.
there's that whole area, I've been talking a lot about trauma, treatment trauma, right? There's this
Hmm.
really kind of this stuck place where people aren't able to get the support that they need. And if they aren't validated in those first early experiences, they may stop seeking out mental health support. And
Hmm.
so, my advice to those people would be to remind yourself of the resilient one, to
Hmm.
continue on your journey in
Yeah.
meeting different types of providers, different ways of
Hmm.
supporting people. And if this is your first intro into drama therapy, maybe, just maybe, start to ask those potential therapists what their awareness
Hmm.
is of it,
Yes.
and then
Hmm.
bring them your sheet of roles, right?
Yeah.
Here's all the different parts of me, and I'm trying to make
Yeah.
sense of them. And
Yeah.
how can you
Absolutely.
support me in that rearrangement of roles and
Yeah.
conscious taking on of roles?
For sure. For sure. I love that. And I'm so curious. I imagine many of us hold roles that might be roles that we were taught early on are roles that we should not hold, or are roles that might make us feel rejected, or are roles that we want to push aside and hide away because we might feel like this makes us, right, the other you've identified, or I'm not going to be a part of the group. Tell me about the roles, any roles that how that was for you in terms of being able to identify and hold roles. And if you ever had the messaging of maybe this isn't a role that will be accepted or held. I'm curious more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so many. I'm
Yeah.
automatically, I feel my heart begin to race and I feel my body
Yeah.
tense up and thinking about the roles that I didn't identify with, but
Hmm.
was socialized to believe that I needed to
Hmm.
step into
Yeah.
in order to be a man, right? And I'm putting my
Hmm.
air quotes up
Yep.
for those who are
Yep.
listening. Uh,
Yes. Uh-huh.
and one of
Yeah.
those first early ones was like the role of the hunter. I'm from
Mm.
upstate New York. I come from a family of men who hunt and shoot and, kill deer
Yeah.
and they eat the deer. And it is so culturally a part of my family in different ways and forms.
Yeah.
And I remember being 12 years old or something like that and kind of going with my father out into the woods and him
Hmm.
having to, go up into the tree stand and teaching me, this is what it means to be a man.
Hmm.
Stepping into this role of the hunter, right? There's also the role of
Yeah.
provider, et cetera,
Oh
et
yeah.
cetera. We go back,
Hmm.
centuries. And
Oh
here
yeah.
I am kind of pondering, like, I'm a sensitive soul. I am someone who could
Hmm.
never imagine hurting an animal. And here I am kind
Yes.
of faced
Yes.
with this
Oh.
this task to not only
Hmm.
show and prove to my father, right, this male
Hmm.
role, this male figure in my life,
Right.
um, to really bond and connect with him in that way
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also kind of step into my manhood. And so I think that was
Yeah.
one of many moments, many roles that I said, I don't align with this. I'm having an out
Yeah.
of body experience. I don't want to do this. And thankfully, my father was intuitive enough to really see me in that moment and
Hmm.
understand I was having a very
Hard.
uncomfortable out of body experience
Yeah.
didn't have visceral experience, having
Yeah.
tears, right? Like I'm ruining the moment. It's
Yes.
like you have to be quiet. If we're gonna hunt deer, you can't be talking.
Right.
You can't, what's happening, pal?
Yes.
And he, didn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do. And, the day
Wow.
ended short and we went and, enjoyed the rest of our day together. But
Oh.
that was just one of many kind of like toxic masculine roles, I think
Hmm.
I was shown growing up
Yeah.
that I had to
Hmm.
figure out how to maneuver around.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And I'm so touched by the fact that your dad attuned to you in that moment. And right, what a gift. Like such a gift. So much of what I talk about is right attunement and lack of attunement. And imagine what would have happened if you were left and kind of forced to kind of push through and of course try and of course want to be connected with your dad and what you knew he was expecting of you in terms of what it meant to be a man. And so I'm just wow, that is such a beautiful gift that you received in that day of being him seeing you and allowing you to be where you were and meeting you there and not
Mm,
trying to push you out of that.
thank you. And,
Hmm.
I think those moments are so important to lift up and hold on to because there
Yes.
are many, many, many other moments throughout my adolescence and young
Sure.
adult years that didn't feel like that.
Yes.
From other men in my family, from men in my
Sure.
social circles or society
Yeah.
where I might have done something that was more associated with
Hmm.
the female gender and
Hmm.
or deemed more feminine and was
Yeah.
immediately called out for it,
Mm.
humiliated,
Yeah.
embarrassed,
Oh.
dragged, right? And I think those
Uh-huh.
moments also sit with us differently
Of
and
course.
take
Whew.
some time to really deconstruct.
Absolutely. I can only imagine. So how has that been, right? And having that experience to really step into what it means to be gender queer inside of a society and a family system, right? Where people are trying to put you into a more binary role.
Yeah. I think part of that is having gender affirming experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
that phrase, gender affirming care, can be so
Mm-hmm.
charged for people.
Yes.
And what I want to say to anyone listening is that it
Mm-hmm.
simply is just affirming your
Yeah.
authentic self, something that you talk about often,
Yes.
Megan. And
Yes.
I,
Uh-huh.
I think about my authentic self and having the gender affirming experiences of
Mm-hmm.
painting my nails and
Mm-hmm.
allowing that to be
Yeah.
something so simple and
Yeah.
having those early
Yeah.
experiences of first being kind of called out in that realm of, wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
you are a boy. Boys do not paint their nails. That is not
Mm-hmm.
accepted. That visceral shame, holding on to that for
Mm-hmm.
many years. And then
Yeah.
kind of coming back to that later on in my adulthood, having a reparative experience by painting my nails again,
Yes.
dazzling my
Yes.
nails, but dazzling my person in different
Uh-huh.
ways that just made me feel more
Yes.
like me
Yeah.
versus some of those other experiences that could have caused me to continue down a path of anxiety and depression. I was
Totally.
someone who engaged in self-harm when I was really
Mm-hmm.
young. And I
Mm-hmm.
was that queer adolescent who
Mm-hmm.
did not know how to find healthy coping mechanisms to
Mm-hmm.
deal
Yeah.
with the pain and
The pain.
stress and frustration that I was experiencing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. And I think that is so it's so important to name and to validate. And I love that you're really illustrating that what it means, especially self-harm. I know that is something that we hear and oh my God, there's such a alarm bells. And I think I know for many parents too. And I'm thinking of parents of teenagers who might be walking through this, experiencing this with their teen, that
Mm.
that so much of what it is just right a reflection of the pain, right? The stress, the anxiety that they're holding, and that it is something to be met with care and attunement. And I'm so curious if you could connecting with that teenage version of you and you could name what it was that you needed from the important people in your life. What would you say that was?
Mm. So many things, Megan. So
Yes,
many things.
yes.
The first is, of course, I mean, I hate to say the buzzword, but curiosity. Having curious
Yes,
parents,
yes,
be a
yes.
little ask some
Mm-hmm.
questions about me,
Mm-hmm.
ask some questions about my identity, how
Mm-hmm.
different experiences made me feel. And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, that radical acceptance, something that I talk about often with my
Yeah,
clients.
yeah.
How do we find this space of accepting these parts,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that we can better understand them?
Yeah.
There weren't many out people in my community, and if they
Mhm.
were out, I wasn't aware of it.
Mhm.
And, I think a lot of the roles I was seeing for queer people was depicted in reality television, which
Yeah.
probably explains why I have such an affinity for reality TV and the roles that I get to see in Housewives. But
Oh,
that's a whole
yes,
other
of
podcast
course.
that I can
For
go to.
sure, for sure.
And yet there are these archetypes that really
Mhm.
show up across all genders. And when we really look at some of those archetypes and what they've been associated
Yeah.
with, we can start to better align our authentic self with
Mm.
those roles, with those parts. And so I
Mhm.
would say to any parent that might have a youth who is struggling, be curious
Mhm.
about that
Yeah.
secrecy. What are the things that maybe they're holding back? They're not
Mhm.
comfortable. And sometimes it is
Yeah.
simply opening up the space for
Yeah.
them to provide whatever it is they may want to talk about. I work with
Mhm.
a lot of adolescents. I work with LGBTQIA plus youth of all
Yeah.
ages.
Mhm.
And what I think a lot of people don't understand is that queer and trans and gay youth aren't going to therapy because of the way in which the world sees them, right? They're going
Yeah.
because of those internalized parts have been misshapen and
Yeah.
have caused them anxiety and depression and
Yes.
stress and
Right.
pain, all those
Mhm.
things that they deserve to be
Yeah.
free of during the most
Absolutely.
fragile part of their lives.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And I'm actually going to share something here that I actually have not talked about. I haven't talked about on this podcast or in my work in general, but I'm doing some writing about at the moment. And
Mm.
my own father identifies as a trans female and came out in adulthood, right? I was in my 20s when she affirmed her own identity, affirmed her own gender. And I am really grappling and sitting with the when your gender is not affirmed, when you don't have the space to be accepted, right? That is part of my generational trauma, right? Is that was passed down to me. And I think you name why it is so important for everybody to be attuned to be affirmed, and that we all have to challenge our own, right, all of our own gender, sexuality norms that we've been conditioned to believe our whole lives, that we all have to kind of do that inner work, because when that work is not done, when we are feeling rejected, not seen, not known, that impacts everybody, right? It impacts all of us, and it gets passed down from generation to generation. And so I think it is so important. I love how you say it, right? That gender affirming care is really just affirming the authentic self. It is so important. It is so powerful. And it has such an impact. And of course, again, as the daughter of someone who did not have, a gender affirming experience for, I think, 60 years of her life, right? To see the impact on her sense of self, to see the impact on her role as a parent, and to see how much the parts that she had to reject and push aside, how that impacted me and parts of myself that I was not feeling permission to accept, to step into, right, these various roles. And so again, it is such this kind of work, right? Gender affirming care is so important. It is so essential. And so I so appreciate your speaking about it today, and
Mm.
yeah, bringing
Well,
it here to our
thank
listeners.
you for sharing
Mhm.
that with me
Yeah.
and your listeners. That's incredibly
Yeah.
full and
Uh,
so vulnerable, and
mhm.
like you said, so connected to the generational trauma, the
Yeah.
family experience. It
Yeah.
impacts everyone. I think regardless of
Mhm.
your identity location, those
Of
are
course.
intersections that we need to
Yeah.
be aware of. It's these biases,
Mhm.
these different parts that we might have shame or
Mhm.
pain around,
Yeah.
and really bringing those shadow parts into the light brings us all
Mhm.
together. Right? It brings
Yes.
our it
Yes.
strengthens the family unit actually.
Mhm.
And if it wasn't for some of those painful conversations that I had early on and
Yeah.
educating my family about my own
Mhm.
experience, I wouldn't
Mhm.
have such a close relationship that I do with my family now.
Yeah.
And a very
Yeah.
open and honest
Right.
relationship. And so I think
Mhm.
even just that sharing, right? It's also about
Mhm.
down the stigma,
Yeah.
the misconceptions that people have, and it's about
Mhm.
getting to know someone that actually identifies as something that's different than you, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
those experiences
Right.
that are actually reparative for us because it helps us step
Yes.
outside of our own perspective and lived experience and
Mhm.
understand that of someone who is different from us.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It is so key. It is so essential. And I'm thinking, I am also the mother of a 3-year almost 3-year-old boy. And, which is just the most delightful role to hold. And, even in all that I have experienced, right? And of the work that I do, right? How, like, my whole work is around, right, affirming authentic self. There are moments where I have to even catch my own, like, deeply conditioned bias where, my son, I might, for bedtime, I might give him two pajama options. Do you want the fire trucks, or do you want his favorite pajama shirt right now? Is just this long shirt. He loves it. And he says, "Don't you love my dress?" And and of course, outwardly, I'm like, obviously, of course, yes. So affirming. But internally, right, I notice this, like, huh, like, I notice this piece come up in me that's like, well, you should be liking the fire trucks and not the dress, which, and I'm naming this out loud because I think this is so important. I think people feel a lot of shame
Mm.
around, maybe their own internal systems that they have held and been so conditioned to believe. And I want to name it out loud, to know that this is the work, right, of me in that moment, being able to, like, dismantle the thing that I have been taught for so long. And of course,
Yes.
we could go on and on about the deeply, toxic masculinity, deeply conditioned pieces around my own family history. There is so much there that we'll talk about more, and where this comes from. But just knowing that this is such important work, and that for anybody that might have a hard time with this, right? If you're someone that, of course, we're about to feel angry to mention, right, everything that we're hearing in the news, everything going on in our country, and how people's authentic identity is being used in such a harmful way, that that I just want everybody to be curious, right? Get curious with yourself and be so willing to step into this work of getting curious and doing the hard work to challenge the notions that you've been conditioned to hold, and think about in everybody that you encounter each day, how can I affirm their authentic self? How can I be
Mhm.
there with that?
Even that moment that you shared, it's so incredibly important to pay attention to those thoughts, those immediate impulses. And I
Mhm.
think because we all have them, and
Mhm.
it's so easy to shove it down, pretend it doesn't exist. Right?
Mhm.
It's making me feel uncomfortable, and I don't want to
Mhm.
experience this, right?
Mhm.
And I think to my own self how there are years of kind of that immediate reactions and responses that were
Mhm.
dialed into internalized homophobia, internalized
Mhm.
phobia,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
internalized biphobia, et cetera,
Yes.
and trying
Right.
to be curious about why is it that I'm having this strong response or
Mhm.
reaction.
Yes.
And
Oh,
then I have to
totally.
kind of go back down the path, look at the
Mhm.
historical context, look at the
Yep.
social context,
Yep.
and start to kind of uncover some of those things. When we think about sex versus gender, sex are
Mhm.
the chromosomes, right, that we are born in
Mhm.
this world with, that have
Right.
legal ramifications or on paperwork, etc. But gender is a performance. Gender is
Mhm.
this thing that we slowly step into and we are
Mhm.
socialized to be. And so
Right.
we start to respond and react to those around us based off of those norms that we're talking
Yeah.
about. Boys and men act like this, and girls and women
Mhm.
act like this. But what that
Right.
does is that it puts us back on that good bad binary,
I know. I know.
right? That
Yep.
life does not
Mhm.
exist in the black and white. Life exists in
No.
the gray, as you
Yep.
say.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I think so does gender. And when we start
Mhm.
to really
Yes.
look at that and be curious
Yeah.
about that, we stop
Mhm.
saying things like, good morning, boys and girls. Good morning,
Yes.
men and women. We start to actually see there are people who don't identify as
Yeah.
one or the other. And I think it's so important for
Mhm.
people to educate themselves. If you aren't
Mhm.
sure the differences, that is okay.
Mhm.
You can
Right.
ask someone, you can look that up. But
Mhm.
I think it is so, as you say, because of what we're seeing right now happening in our
Mhm.
society, this direct war on gender
Yeah. Yeah.
is so present that it
Mhm.
feels even more important for me to say, I'm actually
Yeah.
queering my lens, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a moment and say, I'm gonna look at this scenario or this moment or
Yes.
experience in my life a little bit
Mhm.
differently,
Mhm.
and see if I can reverse roles, step into the
Mhm.
role of the other, the queer one, and maybe
Yes.
see it a little bit
Yes.
differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. And I love this. Oh, if everybody could just reverse roles, right?
Oh
I mean,
man.
again,
Ah.
just to step in to see what might this feel like, right? What might this feel like? And it's just this is how we truly develop empathy, right? The ability to step into the role of someone else and hold deep compassion, curiosity, and empathy for their experience, for their lived experience.
Mm.
And tell us a little bit more about what queering the lens, what that means.
When I think about cis heteronormativity, it
Mhm.
is this a lens, I would say,
Mhm.
to all of us that we're all born into. And
Mhm.
so when we start to move through the world, we have this assumption that we are all cis heteronormative. And there are so many different
Mhm.
ideals and values that kind of get brought up with that, whether it's
Yeah.
spiritual, religious context. And that's again a whole nother kind of genre topic to explore, the religious trauma I had that was
Oh,
also
yeah.
very much kind of overlapped and associated with being raised Catholic,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
my own experience of having to reevaluate my relationship to the role of the spiritual one. But
Yeah.
when I come back to my education, when I come back to this place of going to college and starting to get the language, understand the words to which to
Mhm.
could actually describe my real life experiences, the puzzle
Mhm.
pieces started to make more sense. And to
Yeah.
queer the lens is to really look, is to break down and look at the other, look at look at the situation not from a place of black and white, but from the gray,
Yeah.
asking
Yeah.
more questions, and
Mm-hmm.
to really be curious about how does my gender perform and how do I
Mm-hmm.
witness others in their bodies in that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yeah.
I think to describe gender dysphoria can be really confusing for people who have never experienced it.
And how would you describe it?
I would describe it as an out of body experience
Mm-hmm.
where the typical gender norms that are associated with your assigned gender are not aligning for your authentic self. They're not
Yeah.
aligning for your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And that is from a very vague place, right? I think my
Sure.
hope is that eventually one day we're at a place where these gender norms aren't norms at all, that people are
I
just
know.
people, right? People just
People,
exist.
right.
And
Yes.
yet
Yes.
it makes us
Mm-hmm.
feel safe to have a better
Mm-hmm.
understanding of who someone is by
Mm-hmm.
those visual markers, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
see someone that doesn't maybe necessarily present how they identify, that could be
Mm-hmm.
confusing for me and it makes me look at my own relationship to my gender and or
Yes.
sexual orientation and or
Totally.
intersection,
Yes,
right?
yes, right.
So
All the
those things
intersections.
force us to be
Mhm.
reflective about ourselves, and that can,
Yes.
again, be a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
uncomfortable place for people.
It can. Oh, it can. And I and I'm just thinking again, like back to being a toddler mom, how early, I mean, literally before a child is born, right? The gender norms are thrust upon them, right? From the moment you find out, right, what gender child, is you are having, right? All of a sudden, all of these identity markers get thrust upon, right? Pink, blue, fire trucks, dolls,
Mm.
and I think it's so important, and even for me to really look at even deeper, how I can even like step into, unconsciously, right? Like just like I did, right? The fire trucks. Do you want the fire trucks or do you want the dress?
Mm.
But to really even offer more opportunity to step into the gray. What does he enjoy? And to really, be with him and support him in that. And
About finding that euphoria, right?
yes, yeah,
That
what lights him up?
Yes,
Hmm.
exactly. What are the
Yeah.
things that truly have that visceral,
Yeah.
affect over your child, where
Hmm.
you're seeing something special light up
Yeah.
inside of them? Well,
Yes.
that's who they
Yes.
are,
That's who they
and that
are.
doesn't.
Right.
The things that they like or enjoy, that
Mhm.
doesn't reflect or determine who they are at their core, right?
Yeah,
These are passions in
exactly.
their lives.
Right.
And yet
Right.
we shouldn't have to feel restricted to
I know.
particular things
Absolutely.
because of who we
Yes.
are. Right.
Right. Oh, for sure. I had a friend actually, I was with a few weeks ago, and her husband had texted her that her toddler son asked for him to paint his nails. And she was like, so do it. Like, duh. And he's like, yeah, that's what I did. I am. But, like even that moment of so much, right, of these internalized norms of even the fact that he had to ask or he felt like I should ask versus the just doing. And of course, everybody is going to fumble, right? And I am sharing, right, my own experiences just to give permission that everybody is going to fumble, right? We're not going to be perfect in how we step into this. I know, again, as the daughter of a parent who identifies as a trans female, who I experienced a majority of my life, who presented as a very, cisgender male, there I'm gonna fumble, right? Like there are the being able to like the whole transition process, right? There are moments where I might fumble but also I'm gonna identify it. I'm gonna name it because I think I know in the experience of inside of my family system, right? Everybody feels on edge of like, oh, am I gonna say the right thing, the wrong thing? Oh my gosh, am I gonna
Mm.
misgender? And all of these stressors around am I going to mess this up? Am I going to do it wrong? And I think an important piece of this is like, yes, we're all going to fumble, but as long as we name it and we say, I'm going to do better next time. I'm going to do better next time. I'm learning, I'm getting curious, I'm growing. And I with the goal of I'm staying with you in affirming, right? In affirming who you are. in your authentic self. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to be I'm not going to be perfect. And I think that's so important for all the good girls here, right? Of like, we want to
Mm,
do it perfect. And even as I name some of these things that I'm fumbling with, right? There's like a voice inside of me that's like, oh God, I shouldn't share that because that's all of a
mm,
sudden, right? I'm no longer good or perfect. But again, I name that as a way to show that in this healing work, we're never getting to this most quote unquote perfect place. We're just allowing ourselves to be flawed individuals who are, able to be authentic, able to make mistakes, but also able to name and to have these hard conversations around I want to do better. I want to see you. I want to affirm you. And again, it's okay if we are not perfect. And I'm curious how that lands
mm.
for you, because I imagine you've had experiences with individuals in your life who have fumbled, right? Who have not gotten things perfectly.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious what that has been like for you.
Yeah, I think that part about really affirming someone is about respecting someone. I would
Mhm.
respect absolutely every human being if they respect me as well. And it
Mhm.
begins here, it begins within you, right? You're
Mhm.
showing up as your authentic self and meeting someone where they're at. When we think about therapy,
Mhm.
it's about validating that person and their
Yeah.
experience.
Mhm.
And I think for me, it is also kind of relinquishing the role of the perfect one or the one who does it right,
Mhm. Yeah.
because we're all learning. And
Yeah.
language is evolving and is
Mhm.
changing. And there's a
Yeah.
very strong hold to the past that we're seeing right now
Yes.
in
Oh
our
gosh.
society.
Yes.
Folks really
Mhm.
clinging to the way things were or how they
Mhm.
were raised. And it
Yep.
makes perfect sense. I think there's a
Sure.
lot to
Of
do
course.
with safety, right? And feeling
Yes.
comfortable. And
Yeah.
when we start to break out of that bubble and really, again,
Mhm.
swap roles, we can create a
Mhm.
new narrative, not
Mhm.
only for the world that exists, the
Yeah.
very diverse world that we live in,
Yes.
but also for
Yes.
ourselves. And maybe some
Mhm.
of those roles that were either role locked or needed to be
Mhm.
kind of revisited in maybe a
Mhm.
therapeutic sense. And so when I
Yeah.
even go back to, drama therapy and creative arts therapy,
Mhm.
or even narrative therapy and play therapy, we
Yeah.
are telling a story.
Yeah.
We are creating a narrative about our lives and where we hope and want to see our lives in the future.
Yeah.
And if that past narrative for you was actually really harmful, then retelling and recreating a new one later on in life is incredibly healing and repairing.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
for me, it has been about not only recreating new narratives in my own identity in life,
Mhm.
but recreating new narratives as a family unit.
Yeah.
We were maybe potentially a family that didn't talk about some of these topics like sexual
Mhm.
orientation and or
Mhm.
gender,
Yes.
and or trans rights, and being able to
Mhm.
educate my parents and my family
Yes.
unit, right? It starts on that individual level and respecting people and being curious, asking questions. Is it okay that I ask about this? Right? I'm just checking right out the gate. I'm checking in with you. Is it okay that I ask about this topic that
Yes.
I actually feel uncomfortable bringing up because I don't think I have the language for it? And also, I know that it's potentially a big and important part of you. And I love you
Mhm.
and I respect
Mhm.
and I
Yes.
know how that might impact you.
Oh, yeah, I love that so much. And I just want to like capture that as a beautiful script for anybody who is worried, right? Am I going to say the wrong thing to take, right? Can I ask you about this? I mean, such a beautiful entry point into it
Mm,
with such compassion, such curiosity. I think that is such a powerful takeaway for anybody who is wanting to step into this conversation with the important people in their lives, but might feel afraid
yeah.
of doing it, quote unquote, wrong. So I think that's such a beautiful script to use. And as we wind down to the end of our conversation today, which I already feel like
Oh,
we could go on for
no.
we could go on for much longer, so we will have to do this again.
I would love that.
But I wonder, what is one thing that you hope everyone listening takes away from our conversation today?
I think that so many things. I think that that trauma lives in the body. We know this.
Mhm, mhm,
And complex trauma can look so differently for all of us. And some of these experiences that we have around gender or sexual orientation or the many different intersections, right? When I say queering the
mhm,
lens, I am
mhm,
saying we look at disability, race, ethnicity,
Yeah.
right? Neurodivergence. The
Hmm.
things that make us unique, the things that make us different can also come from a place of resilience, right? It can come from a place of strength. And when we transform those moments of hurt or harm and be curious about how those moments can actually inform a more beautifully integrated and resilient self, that is when we really get to swap roles, right? We really get to step outside of ourselves and into a different perspective and maybe, just maybe, learn something new about
Yeah.
ourselves.
Mm. Oh, I love that so much. Ah, Cal, thank you so much for being here with us today and bringing your beautiful, full, authentic self with so much insight and wisdom and compassion and care. I'm so grateful to have you here to have this really important, essential conversation. So thank you so much for being here, and please tell our listeners how they can find you, what you offer. Let us know more about what they can expect from you.
Thank you, Megan. You can
Hmm.
learn more about me. You
Yes.
can follow me on my Instagram, Cultivate with
Yes.
Cal, or check out my
Love it.
website,
Hmm.
cultivatewithcal.com.
Love it.
I'm supporting folks with support groups and
Mhm.
individual psychotherapy, creative
Beautiful.
arts therapy, and drama therapy.
Mhm.
And for anyone that may be a little apprehensive to that, or maybe I don't want to do some drama or acting, right? I would really
Yes.
encourage you to understand that it's such an integrative approach. It involves talk therapy
Mhm.
and more, and to
Yes.
maybe sit down for a consultation and see if it might be something that resonates with
Oh,
you.
yes. And I will say that my whole healing journey has been one of deeply ingrained creative arts psychotherapy work, and it is so powerful, so essential. So I fully recommend this so deeply. So please check out Cal. We will put all of your links into the show notes, and we will, of course, absolutely have you back. So thank you so much, Cal, for
Oh, it's
being
been
here.
so lovely. Thanks so much,
So
Megan.
lovely.
Appreciate
Thank
you so much.
you. Too. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Good Girls Gotta Heal. I am so grateful to have you in this community. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That helps us out greatly. And we'll see you next time.